Google, if you remember, when in the early 2000s, they were the place of whimsy. You had the slides in the office, you had bold pop colors, you had all of that. Today, if you look at the kind of spaces they look at, it's authentic, nature connected. They like seeing things at work. So for example, if you can expose a hinge between a column and a slab and show how that joint is working, they love that.
Diversity will come back and back and back because that is what we are. So, and I think now we speak about it. After a couple of years, that will just dilute. I mean, that will become the normal.
When someone's in Europe, for example, they'll go to the office at 8, they'll put their heads down, they'll work, they'll have their lunch break, they'll be out by 5, and life happens outside. Whereas in the Indian context,
it happens inside.
Yeah, exactly.
Internal space planning, I have to say, or I totally agree that it's absolutely international because our workflow in the larger campuses and MNCs are basically international.
It is time to acknowledge and honor the brilliant minds who have joined us today to share their valuable insights and expertise. Sir, ma'am, I would invite you on stage. Shravan Bendapudi from Gensler and Arunima Guha from RSP Design Consultants. As we move ahead, let me brief you about the first panel discussion of the day, titled 9 to 6, Nexus of Launchpad and Living Metropolis. As cities grow and workplaces become more dynamic, how do design solutions address both the demands of a fast-paced economy and the nuances of urban living? This session will examine how innovative workplace strategies, flexibility, and local context come together to shape productive, sustainable, and adaptive environments. The dialogue will also explore the evolving role of design in fostering collaboration, well-being, and inclusivity across India's diverse workforce. With insights from both global and local perspectives, this discussion will shed light on the future of workplaces that serve as catalysts for growth in India's urban centers. Without further ado, I'll hand over the stage to our speakers.
Let's start this dialogue. I'm happy to see such eager faces here. The topic, as you have already introduced, seems pretty interesting and especially very relevant to the, the life that we are living in a metropolis. We both are from Mumbai, and I don't think anybody would know better than us. Coming from our work experience and also our experience from daily lives, we would share our thoughts about how workspaces have evolved over the years, and especially what is in vogue and what is trending, and what should be done, could be done, and we will just share our thoughts aloud. That's what we intend to do, and thanks to the organizers who have formulated such an interesting dialogue for us to participate. And Shravan, anything that you would like to say now?
Sure. So firstly, this is going to be a bit of a discussion that Arunima and myself are going to have. We're going to bring two different perspectives to this. You might be wondering, what is a data guy doing in a design forum? And the idea is that there is a perspective there. I've had the privilege of kind of being on both sides of that, of let's say this lens of where data and let's say art in a sense meet, right? And what does that really do for informing our design? So I'm really excited for this discussion because Arunima is going to bring in her perspective as a designer. I'm going to bring in my perspective of what I've been seeing from, it'll not be dry data, obviously, there's beauty in math. So if you're able to kind of take away anything from this session, I think it would be how, and hopefully we're able to convey that as how you can look at this collaboration that's happening between, say, what is quote-unquote traditionally known as architecture, taking in more diverse perspectives to trying and coming up with narratives and stories and experiences that are richer for folding in the more diverse perspectives, right? So I think if our conversation can kind of give you that, I think we'd have been successful.
Yeah. So I think the way to start is that, we are all coming from various cities of the great nation. And frankly, what I feel that we are the center stage of the global market. And pretty much the workspaces and the campuses that we have around us is pretty international standards. However, as designers, we have to be conscious about the context and the background where we come from. And coming from that, I think it is would be great to start our discussion from that perspective. And if you ask me, the 2-3 factors that I think that makes our design different or stand out from what we see internationally is the Indian context itself stands for, I think, diversity. So that's a very important and interesting aspect that comes into our design. And of course, the climatic factors, which is very unique as part of the globe. And what else do you think?
So you actually bring up an important point. When you bring up diversity, I think it allows us to take a step back and say, before we get into exploring, say, the more literal forms of context, we do have to understand the cultural side of context and how do we really design for that. So we have these conversations, for example, and this is where, the notion of understanding data sometimes helps. When we were kind of doing studies on how people work through a day, we saw that for employees in India, the number of breaks that they take is probably, I think it was a factor of 2.5 as compared to the number of breaks people take elsewhere. Now, obviously, you don't want to just stop there. You want to get to the next level and say, well, what's happening? So when you start to look at that, you start to understand that, okay, when someone's in Europe, for example, they'll go to the office at 8, they'll put their heads down, they'll work, they'll have their lunch break, they'll be out by 5, and life happens outside. Whereas in the Indian context,
it happens inside.
Yeah, exactly. It does. You go to office at 10:30, you'll work for an hour, then you'll go for a chai with friends, then you'll kind of come back, and then you'll go for lunch, and after lunch you'll go for a walk, and then you'll come back, and then you'll work for some time, and then there's evening time and recreation. And as a result of that, we found that there are deeper relationships that you form in the office. Right?
It's almost like a parallel home, a parallel family, literally.
It is, right? So you have good friends in the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you also stay longer
Yes.
in the office as a result of that, right? So when you're taking in these notions of designing for workplace, I think understanding even those kind of cultural things becomes very important. So to your point exactly, what the workplace for a lot of people has also become is a safe space.
Yeah.
Kind of taking on the diversity side that you kind of talked about. It's a place where your background doesn't matter, right? Where what your situations that you've come from don't matter. It's about you getting together and
What
doing
we do
something
together.
Exactly, doing something with a shared purpose. With your nodding, I can see that I think you probably resonate with a lot of that on the work that you're doing as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. Correct. So, when we speak of diversity, especially in Indian context, and especially in Bombay, probably, we resonate better. The background that you mentioned, it is actually varied, and they do not ever coincide. If you pick up 5 people from your team, 5 people will have different kind of lifestyle altogether, not a single overlapping. So in this context, it is very important that the spaces that we create in our campuses, be it as small or a big campus, whatever it is, it should be absolutely as neutral as possible, so that the moment we walk in, we belong to a particular community and not where we come from or where we have walked out in the morning. So coming from that, the second point, we can, since we can delve into this for a longer period of time, but time is a constraint. So just flipping through the other topics. So in terms of Indian context, we were discussing about the climate things, and
Yes.
technology has evolved over time. I mean, I'm sure over the 10 years, we have seen a lot of changes in what we are using as building materials, and you would totally, I'm sure, agree with me. So anything that you want to mention, because, top of the mind, I was thinking that the campuses that we usually design for MNCs like Microsoft or Google or the usual big names that we come across. So here the positive part is that we get to explore a lot. We are not restricted. It's not a normal campus per se. Here, they go beyond the boundaries. They want to reach the best. So here the materials and the the sustainability factors, what we can explore is immense. Especially, for example, the glass. It has evolved so much over the last 10 years, and today we can see dynamic glass to take care of the climatic changes. Of course, rest assured, the basic design principles of building orientation, etc., stays as is. But the change that we have seen over the last 10 years is immense. What do you think?
The change has been immense. I think this is one conversation I'm sure a lot of clients have with you as well, is when things started off, it was very much taking a Western template and trying to apply it to India, right?
Yeah.
To your point on climate, glass buildings in a hot climate, I mean, that's a conversation, or that's a debate that keeps going on in the market.
Yes.
I think what has, or what is trying to happen, hopefully it'll happen over time, is there was a purpose why that started in the first place.
Yeah.
Because when and you'll resonate with this, when the multinationals were coming down, they really needed to see a familiar template of building. When they would go to typically what our vernacular architecture was, that wasn't something that they were comfortable or familiar with. And so to try to take office space in those buildings, developers had to essentially say, hey, here's a building exactly like how you have back home, so you feel comfortable with it and you have the paradigm with it. Now, though, I think we've reached a level of maturity. We can guide the discussion of what that building can be, right? I think there's enough history when a company from another country is coming down to try to settle in India. The lesser number of, say, unfamiliar aspects they have, the more comfortable they can feel quickly. But I think now what's happened is there's been enough of a history, about 25 years of a lot of these MNCs operating in India, where I think if we're kind of trying to look at what the architecture should be that's more climate contextual, the others will actually take it up as well. Other thing, and I'd love for you, because you've been working with Microsoft, you've been working with firms like Google and all as well, I'd love to kind of get into is, there does seem to be this kind of push from even the companies. Earlier they would try to be more global, but now they want to be more local. They want the local side of things to really come out. They want to celebrate the fact that they're in this context and do something more authentically. I saw that in some of the works that you've done, right?
Yeah, agree. So that there is an inclination towards, coming back to the roots like that. However, I think what we are doing these days, that it has to be a mix of both the worlds probably, because after all, our life has changed, and the global influence, the lifestyle has also become pretty cosmo. So our expectation from our buildings has become also, it has kind of shifted from what used to be 50 years ago. So in terms of visibility, and in terms of, while you sit at the desk, what you see outside, how far you can see outside, to what extent you can see, these aspects are basically controlling the facade of a building, or the internal space planning of a building. Internal space planning, I have to say, or I totally agree that it's absolutely international, because our workflow in the larger campuses and MNCs are basically international. We are collaborating with other countries, other teams, so it's not very much different from what is happening elsewhere. However, our expectation that we belong to a particular geographical location, and what if we can marry the roots to the existing modern aspects of architecture does play, and materials like clay tiles, etc. They are coming back. Little warm colors with red clay tiles. People expect that, which was not happening probably. Which was not the expectation 6-7 years back. It was mostly metal cladding and this and that. So good that we are looking at a different kind of facade these days in some of the buildings. I wouldn't say all of the buildings, but yes, there are some clients who are really sensitive, who appreciate, and we love to work for them. So one of example you have seen probably in Pune, Hexaware, there's a second campus coming up. So the whole cladding is so Indian. So it's stone and the local materials have been used. It's very different from the usual thing that we get to see. So yeah, that context is very essential. How about your experience when dealing with projects and clients here around?
So I think there are a few things that you said that kind of do resonate. Again, I'm the stepping back guy, right? I take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and then get into the details, kind of thing. My vantage point affords me a view that that allows me certain privileges, I would say, in terms of how people are thinking about their spaces in the first place. Starts off with, I think there is a big push that's essentially happening on storytelling. So a lot of things that Arunima was talking about is coming through the movement of, say, for example, hey, we'd love to rediscover our old art forms through modern methods, or we'd love to rediscover, what used to happen, or climate responsive things that we used to do in the past that we'd want to modernize to today. So there is, in a sense, this whole idea of truly understanding ourselves in the context of the modern world that everyone's really, looking at seriously and almost from first principles. So earlier there used to be the thing of either you're Indian or you're global, right? Either you're international or you're Indian. Today, all of that's kind of fusing in because, a lot of Indians are very happy to say that, hey, one of the reasons I'm going and working for a big company in the first place is because I want to feel connected to an international community, right? I want to feel connected to different cultures. There's a reason I'm going for that level of exposure. But at the same time, I do not want to lose my identity in that either. So how do you kind of fuse those two becomes really important. How do you create that sense of belonging for them becomes really important. And the other reason that story is becoming so important, and that's why I was taking the examples of Microsoft and the companies that you're doing, is value alignment. And how do we make that value alignment as visible as possible is also becoming very important. So for example, one of my favorite kind of evolution stories of, say, the workplace aesthetic has been that of Google. Suppose a hinge between a column and a slab and show how that joint is working. They love that. You could never imagine that would be Google. Exposed concrete, exposed everything. Don't hide anything away. We want to see, like some of the conversations we've had with clients, they're like, Meta, for example, right? So they're such an interesting company. Their value is that we're always a company in progress. We're never fully built. That's why their spaces look like that. So the design conversations that we have with them is, we're like, hey, we did this concrete floor, it's cracking. They're like, yeah, that's what concrete does, let it. So this whole notion of this pristine, shiny, right, completely finished thing is kind of going away to companies starting to figure out, who are we, man? Like, who are we really? Right? Because we're trying to attract a certain type of talent. We're trying to attract a certain type of, client, if in the business sense. We want to show what our values are, right? So that becomes, and I think that's what you were kind of alluding to when you're seeing the evolution of the facades, the way the interiors are working, the way the spaces are working. I'm sure it must be really exciting to have those conversations with those clients.
That could be extensive, actually. We can do that afterwards also. So, Yeah, so Shravan, I mean, population density is again another factor which is very relevant to our Indian context. So, I mean, post-pandemic, we have seen a paradigm shift in how we see workspaces and how we plan workspaces. So, open workstations, shared workstations. These are concepts that have evolved, especially post-pandemic. And what are your thoughts about that?
So density, I think this is one thing where we do need to have a real discussion about the Indian context. Is that we're not the only country that's dense, right?
Yeah.
If you go to Japan, go to any other, there's so many parts of Asia. You go to China, you go to Vietnam, you go to Manila and Philippines, you go to Indonesia. They're all facing that challenge right now. So sometimes I think we let ourselves off the hook on a few things, saying, oh, some things will not work because scale. It's like, no, people have made it work. So the thing that we've got to be mindful of is, and I don't know, I think we were having this discussion in the morning maybe, or, no, sorry, I was having this discussion with someone yesterday. For us, I think sometimes we use scale as an excuse to not include dignity, right? And what I mean by that is somehow get it, like, for example, we were talking about in the morning, that, for example, people queue up in lines to catch public transport in Mumbai. Right. A lot of the times that's in the open air, right? Basic dignity would dictate that, hey, at least let's put a cover on it so it's all weather.
Yeah.
Right? Are there surfaces that, so for example, I talked about the idea that after lunchtime people tend to go for a walk around campus. And you've actually, RSP's done that really nicely in some of their campuses, where you have the walking paths, right? You're not fighting for space with cars on roads to try to have that walk, right? You do integrate the notion of, okay, people want to have a walk after lunch, let's actually do a dignified experience for them. I think that notion of, oh, there's so many people, so therefore we just can't do certain things. It has to be tight packed, it has to be dense. We have to get people to sit on top of each other. Cafeterias have to be really tight, and all of these various types of spaces have to be really tight. We push the density to the point of compromising on dignity. And I think that's something that we have to be careful about. It's the density thing is not unique to us, and other countries have solved for it in a dignified fashion. Right? And so that's something that we do need to kind of take. I think that's an area that we probably still have
to learn. Learn from whether,
we have to learn that.
And I think something that has helped immensely, that the advancement in technology, the remote working. Remote working has really helped shape, the work culture today to a great extent. I mean, to an extent at least I couldn't have imagined. Architects team up, they work together, that's the whole idea. But the way we have survived through the incredible pandemic, it was beyond anyone's imagination, for that matter, I think. And we have realized that, one-to-one conversation helps. It binds you emotionally, I think, and pushes you to deliver more. So that is I think that is something that is, you learn at a very personal level, and that has contributed to the whole idea of having an office remote out of the campus, and the schedules and the strategies around which the MNCs are thriving today. Because I'm sure the floor area ratios, this, that, it's expensive, and we have to bang the buck, So it is important that the efficiencies, etc., are taken care of, while we also address the issues of deliveries.
100%. I think the human angle that you're talking about, the human connect. So one of the things that most people give pushback on when talking about hybrid and going to the workplace, it's like, hey, why do I really need to go to work? I have a laptop, I have internet connectivity, and I think at some level people are forgetting that culture happens in place. Because I mean, it's firstly how you conceptualize culture. So culture is basically the way that I personally have always looked at culture is basically that thing that's telling you what behaviors are encouraged and what behaviors are discouraged. We as a group have, or we as a collective have decided that there are certain things that are our values. And so based on those values, there are certain things that we can do and should do, and there are certain things that we shouldn't be doing, right? That's ultimately what culture is. So for that to essentially happen, when you design a space, you're really looking at, are you enabling the right things to happen in that space or not, right? So this may seem a little esoteric, but I'll land it for you. Let's take a workplace example. So we deal a lot with agile teams, right? So agile product development teams. The technology teams, they typically say 8 to 12 people in size. They are cross-functional, so they are kind of limited to themselves. If you look at how they collaborate, these teams, how they collaborate, what will happen is I'll be typing away. In 10-15 minutes, every 10-15 minutes, I'll turn to my partner or turn to someone that's close within the team, have a 2-3 minute conversation with them, and then come back and start typing. And again, have someone, hey, why don't you come and look at this? Does this look okay? And again, Now, if for them, if you design a workplace that is, say, noisy and buzzy within that team, you're encouraging them to have the conversations right there and then. That's what you need to do. If for them, you do the whole, let's put all the workstations here, but then if people collaborate, there'll be disturbance here, so let's put the collaboration spaces away. You're discouraging collaboration because
exactly,
each time
because that's not happening naturally.
It's not happening naturally. So for every 2-3 minutes, you will not get up and go somewhere else.
Nobody
and
would
then
put
come
in that
back
effort,
to the place, right?
because that effort comes with an effort.
Exactly. So in that paradigm, we flip the things around and say, hey, you know what? Let's make sure that your regular workspace is actually buzzy. And maybe we provide, if I do want to kind of get away and work quietly, that for undisturbed durations, I will go away for, say, 2 hours, 3 hours. For that, I can get up and go somewhere.
Go somewhere, especially for a focused...
for a focused work. Yeah. So understanding how it is that you design spaces to encourage the right kinds of behaviors for the right kinds of culture to really build up is really important. And we're giving it in the context of work, but this happens everywhere, right? Where a lot of the companies that we were talking to, especially when they were encouraging people to come back to work, would say things like, yeah, people go to malls and restaurants, but they don't want to come back to the office. Right? Because in the office, they would say, we have concerns about safety, we have concerns about this. It's all post-rationalization, right? The thing is, they're like, the work is happening, so what's really the big deal? The culture part of it is completely getting missed out in that process. Right? So I think that, and therefore the kind of evolution of workplace to focus on that is something that I think... Right?
And I think the design has also evolved in a fashion so that, you attract people to work. Of course, retention is another factor altogether, but you attract people. You wake up in the morning and want to go to work, rather than feeling in a claustrophobia inside your work that when it'll take 5 and I'll rush home. You feel like staying at work and be involved in this collaborative process that is essential for something good to come out at the end of the day. So that understanding has, I think, emerged in a very nice manner, and I think all the campuses that we both are working on takes care of these factors. And of course, these factors have evolved into being part of policies and policymakers' checklists, which help in going forward. In advancements of, the quality of life that we live. Yeah?
Actually, the policy thing is very important. I think that's something that you touched on that's important to note as well. So, on the back of all the evolution of the work-life integration that we were talking about, all that happening, this notion of single-use is going down a lot. Right? So single-use buildings, single-use campuses, that's only workplace, it's only focused on work, or it's only focused on residential is going down. the good news is there are avenues where policymakers also realizing this and are relaxing allowable or other uses being allowed within certain typologies, right? So, for example, I think on the SEZ side, earlier it was only 10% or 20% of the mix could be, now that they've gone. So, policymakers are realizing that there needs to be the notion of lifestyle and a mix of uses to really be able to sustain, great, not only work experiences, but other type of experiences as well, right?
Because,
life experience.
as we said right at the onset, that it's basically a parallel life, You step out of your so-called house and enter into your home literally. You spend so many long hours here, and it is essential that it is built in a fashion so that it feels part of your life and you want to be part of it. So, yeah, you're right. So that's another very important aspect.
It's really heartening that way to see that, honestly, the pandemic and the way that workplaces started to get looked at, and this has kind of trickled down to all other kinds of spaces as well. I think at some level, designers were so far down the rabbit hole of the details of the design of space. The pandemic really kind of forced us to zoom out and say, what was the purpose of space? Right? Why are we creating the spaces that we want to create in the first place?
It made us rethink, you see, and step back and realize what we are missing out on.
And so, therefore, we've started seeing a lot of really interesting typologies of spaces start to come out that are integrated in either work campuses or lifestyle districts, etc., where the question has become, wait, why are we creating this in the first place? Yes, we'll get to what the Jali pattern inside could be, but hold on a second. Let's take a step back first. What is the space really doing? What is it helping us achieve? And it's not so much what is it only helping us achieve from a business standpoint. It's what is it helping us achieve culturally? How are we enriching the fabrics? How are we enriching the fabrics of our cities? How are we giving, how are we being more responsible in what we're trying to do? All of that is really something that it's been great to be part of that conversation. And I think you've had a few of those conversations with your clients as well, right?
Yeah, of course. And one another aspect that I would like to touch upon is the understanding of the brand of a particular organization and how we portray that through our design. I think this is a question that is, prevailing and asked many a time. However, we feel that brand is just not a color or a logo or something like that. It's about what the company wants to project about themselves. So one campus of organization A can differ from the other campus of organization A and look totally different. And one really cannot connect. But it's about what they want to give to the society, because after all, these are global players and they have global responsibilities. So they have to set an example, and that's what is captured usually in all the briefs. Although, I'm sure it's a process-driven thing between the architects and the clients, where there are extensive conversations and process-driven documentation and understanding what they want to create. Apart from the usual business, what is the mark they want to leave? So that is another aspect of any design that we do.
Brand is big. Brand is 2-3 things. And again, it's really important for us to look at, I was talking about the various perspectives that go into design. Brand is one of them, because brand is basically 2 things for me. One is values, right? What does the company value? What does the organization value? Very important. And second is its persona. A lot of times we have this conception of we're working for this nameless, faceless entity that is the corporate. Like the corporate is always made out to be this, this machine, mechanical, no life, no soul, this thing that happens. But really, if you start looking into it, there are a lot of companies that have really good personas, that have really good, you'll find that in how their people are. So one of the things that really helped transform my own view into this is, as part of the process that we do, we go and talk to a lot of people inside the company. In really great companies that have a strong persona, you will be surprised at how consistent the people are in how they talk about what it is that they do and what their purpose is. So we were working with, for example, a medical equipments company. Okay, so they develop medical equipments, global company. And this particular office was developing the software that goes onto, say, an MRI machine or a PET scan machine or a CT scan machine. So they were developing the software for that. Now, obviously, they're technology guys. And they've been with the company for 10, 15 years. So we were asking them, hey, wouldn't work be more exciting for you in a tech company? Like, why are you here? And the first thing that they said is, we impact lives. We like the notion of being able to positively impact people's lives. And the way that kind of translated, it didn't only do in their day-to-day work. They had figured out schemes where, because they had so many medical equipments, they said, hey, let's get underprivileged communities and give them access to our diagnostic equipment so that they can get their tests done, because otherwise it's very expensive. Because they had leaned into this purpose of, hey, we save lives. Any way that we can try to save lives, we will save lives. And they were using their office campus to do it. Right? So the whole understanding of who are you really, dude? Right? What is this company really about? What are their values? What are they willing to commit to? That enriches design thinking and design process a whole lot. And that's why the whole push towards, brand now as well is, I think earlier it was about, hey, I need a person to do a job. Whereas now everyone's really looking at that war for talent thing, right? That everyone's really looking at, hey, I need this person to be invested in the work that they're doing here. I can't just have someone doing a 9 to 5. It needs to mean more to them. Right? So when we say 9 to 5, it's not the timings, obviously, literally, but we're not saying that you should work longer, but it shouldn't be that thing that gives you a salary. It has to be something more than that, right? And I think that's something that I've seen in some of the campuses that you guys, and I was really impressed by how you were looking for that purpose in the Microsoft campus, for example, in Noida, and not Noida, sorry, Gurgaon. Where you really start to bring that sense of identity in and who we are as a company. And do you want to talk about that a little bit, that process a little bit, in terms of what you were able to do there?
As I just mentioned, that any design, Microsoft is, by the way, one of our top clients, and we have delivered almost, I cannot really figure it out, but it's a huge campuses, and one after the other that we have done, thankfully, and we are very proud about that. In fact, currently we are also doing another one, and the process, more or less between a client and the architect, remains conventional and unchanged, and for that matter. And what we strongly feel and have been following, that creating a perfect brief before we start the process is very essential, because architects need to understand the client, what we need to deliver. A space could be just a space, but it has a purpose. That's what the designers need to understand, that it is basically changing one's lives, whoever is using that space. So it's a very intangible thing, however, but that's how we are taught and learn, and that's what intuitively we do. So for MNCs like this, I think the creation of brief takes a lot of time, and then of course the design process. Since we are a collaborative company, there are a lot of design verticals who participate in various thought processes, and the latest thinking about workspaces, what can be done and generated. For example, we focus on, as you said, that the variety of spaces that should be introduced and has been introduced rather. And topping the chart is the collaborative spaces, which probably, in the yesteryears were lesser in number, and now it has kind of grown up, because after all, that is where the innovation come from. So that is something that we all have realized across, all cross-culturally, and now we are totally focused in creating collaborative spaces, some open, some closed. And apart from that, since we are dealing with multi-generational workforce in all these campuses, it is essential that we cater to the needs of all the generation, Gen Z versus those experienced ones whose understanding of the workplace is little different from what the coming generation or the upcoming generation has. So to cater to both and to bring them on the same platform, strong social spaces is a need of the hour, and that is what we really focus on. And I think that is the key focus areas these days of all the design works that are going on. Social cafe, work cafe, bringing in different ideas just to enthuse and to instigate the fire in the system of whoever uses the workspace later on going forward. So that is what we target to do and what we try to do. Apart from the, I'm sure we all know about the very stringent sustainability goals that we have, which is the, of course, need of the hour, and that's a different topic altogether. We can, of course, come back to that later, because that's a whole new chapter altogether.
That's great. That's great. So, yeah, the notion of, I'm actually glad you came back to diversity. So just to kind of touch upon 2-3 types of profiles that I think are becoming increasingly important. By the way, just to kind of, you can see that this dialogue is more about what influences design and not design itself, right? But we probably can't stress enough how architects are become or need to become, say, a little bit more than just aestheticians in a sense, or designers, to try, especially in this modern world. Like, a great analogy before we kind of get further into this is that comes to me is how musicians in today's age, earlier you just had to be able to play or compose songs really well, and you were golden. Today, you need to be tuned into social media. You need to look at the technology of music. The entire recording process you need to be invested in, because that's how the indie guys get into it. What is the equipment that you're using? What's the kind of so there's so many other disciplines that suddenly that a musician has to get into, just beyond playing an instrument well. An architect has to be similar now in assimilating the various perspectives of what's really happening. So psychological perspectives, ethnographic perspectives, sociological perspectives, environmental perspectives, scientific perspectives, right? There's so many different ideas that need integration, and that was what the architect has always been. The architect's always been the integrator, the person that's holding that thing in between, and the chef in the kitchen, right? The one who's holding the entire kitchen together. That's always been the architect. And so, therefore, the design fraternity, I think, and so all of the various things that we're discussing, we're just getting into them in a very shallow fashion right now, because, there's constraints of time, and there's each one of them is a topic unto itself. But the idea is, be it an understanding of brand, be it an understanding of culture, work style. For example, for us, when we were designing workplaces, we had to understand what agile meant. We had to get into that process of how products are developed, right? So you kind of understand all of these various perspectives to bring it in. So I'm glad that you came back to diversity, because that's really, really important. Not only are we designing for, every time we talk about, what new workplaces would be designed for, Gen Z, Gen Alpha is going to come into the workplace, always about the youngest crowd. the fastest growing demographic in India, if I'm not mistaken, or the second, either the fastest or second fastest, is people from 40 and up. So how are we designing for the workforce that's 40 and up? How are we designing for not just ability, but for neurodivergence, right? So that's something that's people on a spectrum, as they come into the office, how are we designing for them? How are we designing for, it's not just men and men anymore as a ratio, right? It is the entire spectrum that we're trying to design for. So all of these various things really start having a deep understanding of them is very critical to getting into what the evolution of design will be. It's before we get into the detail of what's the new material, etc. So I'm really glad you brought diversity back again. But sustainability is similar, I think, that you were trying to talk about, right?
Of course. See, diversity will come back and back and back because that is what we are. So, and I think now we speak about it. After a couple of years, that will just dilute. I mean, that will become the normal. People will not even discuss this particular point ever in any seminar because I'm glad that's happening because when I see people, who are like 20 years junior to us, they just do not connect to what we think or what we have gone through. So we're glad that has happened, and I think that has happened all because of, forums like this and dialogues like these. And because people were vocal about it, and people took cognizance of that we have to act upon. So she's queuing over. Okay, so
I think
that's really cute.
So I think with that perspective is where we'll kind of probably, close the conversation here. I think as Arunima and me have been discussing and bringing in, hopefully what we've been able to do is bring in a few different perspectives of what enriches or what adds to the design process, what makes sure that, when we come up with designs, we're not looking just through one single funnel or lens, but we're kind of taking in multiple perspectives and then coming out with something that's ultimately meaningful in terms of pushing our civilization forward. So we're really thankful for the opportunity to have this conversation today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for sharing your valuable insights and perspectives throughout the session. I was queuing to you because we want to do a little rapid fire with you before we let you go. And it's going to be very short questions, very few questions that will sort of keep the excitement up for people to keep engaging in workplace strategies when they're designing. So very quick answers, whichever one wants to go first. So 3 biggest trends that will define commercial office design's future.
3 biggest strengths that will... Yes.
Next two.
Okay, flexibility, human centricity.
Diversity.
Right. One more, quickly.
Sustainability.
So human centricity, sustainability, and diversity. Collaboration zones or quiet pods, which do employees prefer? Both.
I mean, you ask Gen Z, they will say collaborative zone. We belong a little, go to the other side of the...
So one feature every co-working space should adopt from corporate offices.
Social spaces.
Social spaces. One last question to resonate with the theme of the year. Define legacy in one word.
This building. The space that we...
History.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much. It was really beautiful to see the convergence of data and design come together. We really saw the beauty in math through your conversation. And I think what the biggest takeaway from this for us was that the Indian context makes us stand out. It's more an opportunity than a challenge. And I think we really need to embrace that fact when we design workplaces in the future. I think the understanding of how people work through a day really matters to how that space is designed for those people. You can't neglect the human factor in design. And I think that was what we learned from this conversation, and it was really amazing to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. It was great to have you. Let's have a huge round of applause for them.